I am Daniel Hempikian, professor at the Games Interactive Media and Mobile Technology Department, or GIM, at Boise State University. And today I want to take you through the Unity 2020 game engine's XR interactions, new way of doing virtual reality. Be using an Oculus, and I will be taking you through all the steps you need to know to set up a virtual reality environment and to pull input from the Oculus controllers. And I hope you get a lot out of this video. As always, if you like it, please subscribe and share, and so everyone, as many people as possible, can get access to this resource. So, because this package is still in preview, what we'll do is we'll actually just go pull this repo, and what I'm gonna do is grab that URL, open my git bash. I'm going to change directories. So git bash, of course, is just a shell that allows me to talk directly to my computer. And just as you can click around directories by doing this, you can also change directories and list directories by typing ls and cd. So you can see I'm right above the directory for documents. So I'm going to change directories down in one to documents, and then I'm going to change directory to Unity. And now we see all these utilities, and it starts with AI. If we look in my Unity, it's the same thing, right? So it's just two ways to get around your computer. But and how I got git bash, by the way, is if you go to git.scm.com and download this, you'll be able to pull things that are kind of in development, a lot of code that is shared. It's just a great tool to have, and I have a couple videos on my channel about the advantages of using Git and all the power that it lends your development cycle. So anyway, what I'm going to do now is git clone, and then I'm going to do Control-Shift-Insert to clone that repo. So that's just the URL of the web page I was just at here. Okay, so what we're doing is we're pulling this code, the AR and the VR code, and you can see that they have some installation directions, and it's basically just open it in VR. One other thing to note is I do have Oculus installed on this PC, and you'll need to do that, and of course set up your Oculus before you start development. Alright, so I should now have that repo. We can check. It seems to be done. And this is called XR Interaction Toolkit Examples. So let's open that project, and we can just start building directly in that project. So what I'm going to do is close down some of these so that my computer doesn't die. And I'll go to Unity Hub. Now Unity Hub, just a quick overview, allows you to use multiple versions of Unity, and that's a really great idea because honestly, when you start developing a project in Unity, especially a VR project, the frameworks that you depend on from Oculus and from other sources are very likely to change very rapidly, as well as the way that Unity does things on their back end of their game engine. So it's a good idea to freeze your project down to a certain version or keep up with the updates. And Unity Hub allows you to do that because you can use a particular version always, but still have more future versions of Unity running on your computer. So what it's going to allow me to do is specify what version of all the versions of Unity I have on my computer I want to open this project with. Pretty cool. Alright, let's go down to the folder that I just got, which is here, and go down to to VR and select folder. Now, as I said, we can select the version we want to run it on. I'm going to do 20.1.4 F1, and I'm just going to click on it and confirm to open. I'll pause the video while this spins up. Okay, so we're back, and the first thing that it's doing, excuse me, the first thing that it's doing, okay, so before it spun up my project, it is telling me to use XR plugin management, and that XR has been disabled because I'm using the depreciated XR integration. And what we'll have to do is just switch that over, but I want to just give you a heads up about that. Just hit OK. So Unity recently switched to a new XR plugin management system, which is really cool in some ways and just really difficult to use in others. And it's really cool in the way that it is pretty much hardware neutral, so we can use the Oculus Rift, the Oculus Quest, and you can even use the same underlying system for augmented reality as well. That's pretty cool. It's controller neutral, right? So you can pull input from controllers no matter what type of controller you're using. And it should work for things like Vive. I haven't tested it yet, but that's what makes it really, really interesting and really valuable. In other ways, it's fairly difficult to use, and that has to do with the amount of coding you have to do some simple things. So first off, let's take a look at the project settings and scroll down to XR plugin management. We are going to have to use the XR plugin system, so this is a new system that Unity's using to do AR and VR. We're just going to import that. And then we are developing on an Oculus, so we'll check Oculus for plugin providers under Initialize XR Setup on Startup. And what this is doing, we can actually take a look at our package manager here, is it's just importing into our project these two packages. So XR plugin management, which comes with a whole bunch of stuff. And you can look at the documentation for XR plugin management if you want. And the same is true of XR Interaction Toolkit. But here's everything you need to know about that. I'll put a link to this in the description of the video. So let's start keeping track of these. We've got that, and we've also got the GitHub repo for XR Toolkit examples. Okay. Back to the project. So if we take a look at the project and take a look in scenes, let's just open the locomotion scene to get our bearings. This is what it looks like, and let's run it and make sure everything's working. We don't have to install anything else. So what I'll do is hit play, and I'm going to be actually putting on my headset so you'll be able to see what I'm seeing, but in a very small window. I'll be actually in the world. So there's the small window. Now, you'll notice I don't have hands or anything right now, but I do have two controllers, and there's a nice UI. Click on a platform to teleport. So let's click, and I'm hitting the shoulder trigger to move around, and pretty cool, right? So you can see how to do teleportation, and then within a platform, I can click. If it's, so this is a teleportation area, which means I can move around the area. This has a teleportation anchor, which means I'm kind of fixed there. Alright, so I'm going to stop that. everything is working. So that's a pretty smooth way to get VR up and running so far. Let's take a look at how this works. So the first thing we have is an XR rig, and this is not part of the XR integrations example. This is part of the XR plugin, and we'll make one of these in just a second, but just notice that XR rigs have a camera offset, a camera, and you can actually see those right here, and then a left and right hand controller. The left and right hand controller have some settings, and they don't have prefabs or anything yet. That's why you couldn't see hands. They have the line renderer. That was the thing that was going to the target, the red line, and XR interactor line. And that is this. So let's just remember this: XR controller, XR ray interactor, and XR interactor line visual. And then a teleportation area, if we take a look at this platform here, is a mesh collider with a teleportation area script on it. This teleportation area script is provided by the XR interactions examples, and the only thing that they've changed in there is they've added its own collider, its own mesh as a collider, and they have a on hover enter. They highlight the area that you're about to go to, and they de-highlight it when you're leaving, and then they just have a teleportation reticule, which is just this circle that appears. So if we take a look at that, it's just a pretty simple asset, just a highlighted shader basically with a cylinder mesh filter. So we could make our own version of that, but that's not what I want to do in this video. So one thing you could do is just make a prefab by dragging this over into your project and then open a new scene and create that. But let's do something else. Let's go and make let's make a new scene. So if we go into scenes, right click, create scene, and let's call this custom. Let's open it up. Save, and custom has nothing. If I right click here, now I have, because I installed XR plugin management, an XR menu, and if I scroll down to it and I go to room scale XR rig, it's actually going to just remove the old camera, put an XR interaction manager, which you need to do XR in the scene, and put an XR rig in the scene. The XR rig already has a camera offset and a main camera and a left hand and right hand with these line visualizers. So that's a lot of stuff just for free. Our scene isn't very interesting right now, so what I'm going to do is get a free asset, which I already have downloaded, but the process for getting assets now is a little different than it used to be. You go to the asset store in Unity, you make sure you're logged in, and then you search for, low poly. So what we're going to do is just build a scene with some low poly scenery, and just click on 3D, and I like to go down to pricing and do free. And what we'll do is we'll use some of these low poly assets. So I think the one I'm going to use is the low poly environment pack. And if you click on it and then download it and then open it in Unity like this, it's just going to appear in your package manager, and from there you can import after you download. Alright, and you can do that with pretty much anything you want. So we could put fireballs and dragons and whatever you want. Aliens, AI into the scene and be in that world, which I think is just a really cool way of doing development, VR development. Alright, so let's scroll back to our scene, and now that we have these low poly environments, let's take a look at their prefabs. And it looks like they do have some environment stuff, so I'm just going to drag that into the scene. I'm going to reset the positioning here. I'm going to check my XR rig and make sure it's set to 0. And it is. And let's maybe add like a mountain environment, and let's make sure our y-axis is 0, and we can just kind of drag that over here, maybe another mountain, and again let's make sure our y is 0, and drag that over here. So what I'm doing is just kind of bounding in these, let's do one more mountain, bounding in that plane so that it looks kind of a little more natural. Alright, it's not going to look natural, but we'll do the best we can. It will look pretty interesting, I think. Alright, and here we have a kind of, so I'm going to Control C, Control D to duplicate all those, and then I'm just going to rotate them around the y-axis. Yeah, nope. No, maybe. No, that's not what I wanted. Let's rotate them around the z-axis. 180. No, that's not what I wanted either. X-axis. No, I do want y-axis. Exactly what I wanted to do, but we can move them one by one here and just kind of play with them. Let's rotate this more so it's bounding in, and then just kind of pull it in here, and there we go. So now I have a nice kind of canyon, and I'll just Control C, and let's scale that on the x-axis by 3, so it's kind of longer like that, and we have a kind of runway or valley or something. If we wanted, we could put some bushes and grass and trees in there. We certainly don't have to, and you get the idea. We could put some flowers in there, and maybe some big old rocks. I do actually want to save the rocks because I want to make the rocks something that we can use superhuman strength to just kind of pull around, and so I'll just put 3 rocks, and okay, so what I'm going to do now is kind of organize these. So the 3 rocks I want to be XR interactable eventually, meaning that I want them to be things I can grab. So if I'm going to right click in here and create a empty game object. I'm going to make sure that's not in the directional light, but reset to origin, and I'm going to call this scenery. So this is stuff that I don't really care about how it, it doesn't really have a function where I'm going to interact with it in the scene. So that's the surrounding mountains. Now, the rocks are going to be in a different folder. The mountains actually go in scenery as well. So there we go. Now the rocks are going to be in a folder, and I'm just using empty game objects as folders here. They're going to be in a folder called Interactables. Let's put those in there. Make sure I didn't move them around. Okay, good. And then the environment itself we can call ground. Alright, notice that this already has a mesh collider, and so in order to make this something that we can teleport around, we need to do a couple of things. First, on the XR rig, we don't have any locomotion, so we need a locomotion system. We need a teleportation provider, a snap turn provider, and a teleportation. I think that's it. Locomotion system, XR. That should be good. Okay. So the system here is going to be that. Actually, we don't even need to do that. It should find it by default. Snap turn provider is fine. This is just our turn amount. So this is going to allow us to turn right and left by snaps. And then for the ground, we need to put a teleportation area on that. And let's go ahead and add their own teleportation reticule. So if I go back out of here into the prefabs provided by them, they have this teleportation anchor. So I'm going to switch back to XR to ground and make sure that it knows about this custom reticule. Save. Alright, let's run it and see. I don't think this is all we need, but let's just see what we've got so far. Alright, so you're seeing what I'm seeing, yes? In that small window. I saw an error. Nope, no I didn't. Never mind. Alright, so there are my hands, and I should be able to move around, but I can't yet. Not very well anyway. I certainly can't snap turn. I am able to move a little bit. Was able to move up into the wall here, but yeah. So far we're well on our way, but still need some work. So one of the things we need to do is we have a mesh collider. We don't have any colliders that it knows about. So let's add one collider and pull our own mesh collider down into there. Notice that we have everything checked. Let's check nothing. And then let's just check teleport and save it. And let's run it. Oh, we should probably fix the snap turns as well. See what's going on with the snap turns. So the snap turn probably needs to know about the locomotion systems. Let's just make sure that it does. And let's make sure that it knows about the two controllers. And these controllers are going to be found here. So left hand, right hand. Primary access 2D is the turn source, and let's save it. So now we should be able to turn and teleport with these. Turning is working well, as you can see, and teleportation also working very well. So if I click, it takes a second, but then I teleport to the area that I'm clicking on. Let's see if I can get through here. So when there's a mesh in the way, it seems unable to move me, which makes sense. So you can see that it's actually hitting the mesh, right, as I teleport around. And if I try and click on a mesh that isn't a teleportation area but gets in the way of that, it's not going to let me go there. So to prove that that's true, let's turn off all the scenery here, so that we just have this and the rocks. And what we should be able to do, let's move these rocks over here, is see a much better ease of teleportation going on without those extra meshes. Okay. there we go. Okay. It was actually, so the teleportation is switched to trigger here by default. In the demo, it was shoulder trigger, so just be aware of that. But I think that was the only problem actually. So let me just turn the scenery back on and verify that that's true. Yes, it is. All right, so we have cool, full functionality. And notice that I can't teleport up there, but we could very easily make it so I could. The only thing we'd need to add would be to add a teleportation system to these mountains. In fact, let's do that. Let's switch the scenery back on here, and let's grab all the mountains, and let's add a component, teleportation area, and let's, so these all have meshes. So one by one, we would have to add these meshes in. And you know what? Actually, I don't feel like doing that. So I'm gonna go ahead and just remove that component. But you get the idea. So you have to set those up so that they're all teleportation area, and then you could fly up the mountains. All right. The next thing that I want to cover is we made a camera rig from scratch. We set up teleportation object. Let's do some object snapping with prefabs and getting Oculus controller input. So let me close down this scenery, and these rocks, let's make them so we can interact with them. So we're going to add a XR interactor. So an XR grab interactable is what we want, and that's going to add a rigid body. And let's see, we may have to make these convex in order for them to interact. So let's go ahead and do this with these two as well. XR grab interactable. And one by one, let's make sure that these are all, so that is a mesh collider. They should now, they didn't get mesh colliders by default. So let me add a mesh collider here and make sure it's convex. And let's add a mesh collider. And again, we'll make sure it's convex. All right, and let's save that and run it. Okay, so with non-kinematic, non-convex. Oh, did I make those convex? That was not a good idea. With non-kinematic, non-convex with non-kinematic. Okay, so that one needs to be convex too. I think that's just what I forgot there. And convex, vex. All right, one more time. Cool. So let me move to the rock area, and I'm gonna just scroll on it and hit the trigger, and as you can see, I've picked up that rock. Since it's huge, it's like halfway inside me, but I can throw it, and we can definitely adjust how far that rock moves towards us. Let's go ahead and scale the rocks down so we can kind of see the interaction a little better. And we'll cover just how to, very briefly, just how to do snapping so you can snap something in a certain location. First, I'm going to clear that errors for my sanity's sake. And let's just scale these down to like 0.2 to 0.2 and run it again. And the cool thing about this is these, they don't have to be rocks. They could be absolutely anything, and guns. So there it is. I can grab it in either hand and pass it back and forth through my hands. I can throw it and it rolls. And we have a nice distance grab here too, so if I'm kind of far away, I can still pull it to me like that, which is very nice in VR games. But in addition to that, I can reach down and grab it like that. So, very neat. Alright, well that's a lot to get you started there. I want to take a look at some of the other scenes in here that they provide us with. So let's go back to scenes and let's go to world scenes interaction demo. And so again, this is the XR interactions toolkit examples, and that's not what I wanted. Actually, yes it is. Not sure why it's throwing that error, but okay, so let's run this real quick and I'll take you through what's going on in this scene and how to do it on your own. So what we have here is some, we have controllers first of all for the hands, which is pretty cool. I can snap these objects like this to each other, and I'm getting haptic feedback as that happens. You can kind of hear my controllers buzzing. We have UI interaction stuff here. A nice teleportation system where if I hit A, teleportation period appears, and then the control trigger actually triggers it, and we can look at how that's set up in just a second. But what I really want to show you is how to set up this snapping. So as you can see, when this snaps to my hand, it actually goes right on top of the controller like that. And it doesn't really matter where it is, it's always going to go, it's always going to align exactly like this, which is pretty neat. Alright, so you probably want to be able to do that for things like, swords and guns or hammers and building tools, right? All kinds of things in Unity. So what we'll do is just go through how they've set it up. And one thing I want you to notice, if we go to projects and prefabs, this XR rig that we're looking at here, XR rig demo, is actually a prefab they've made. So we can just take a look at that. We can drag this into any scene. So for example, let's get it out of there. For example, we could go back to my custom scene here and remove this. Oops. Maybe not that. Remove this, and then just drag their prefab in to get the one with the nice haptic feedback and the hands. And let's save that and then run it and see the difference. So now you'll see I have controllers for hands, which is pretty neat. Only one has a visible line renderer, if I can get my in between my sensors here. And again, we have this, if I hit A, primary button, and then shoulder trigger, I can move around, which I like. It's a pretty nice way of handling movement. And if I hit A, I have direct haptic feedback. And then, so I just want to show you, we can just move these prefabs directly in. And now I have haptic feedback when I pick stuff up, which could get kind of annoying for everything, but we can turn that on and off. Alright, so that's how to just grab their preset. We showed you how to make, I showed you how to make these from scratch, but that's just how to kind of grab their prefabs and drop them into maybe a scene that you already have built that you want to be VR. The final thing I wanted to talk to you about and show you how to do is how to pull specific input from the controllers. So this is a little more difficult than you might think. A lot of the way that the XR subsystem is set up is you drag things into on hover enter, on hover exit, and you add components and then just attach transforms and game objects where they need to be. So it's a lot of like clicking around. If you wanted to do something like make a gun fire or something like that, and you needed to know when the A or the X or the Y buttons pushed or the trigger buttons pushed, or you needed for some reason to know the position, I'm going to show you how to do that. And it's a little tricky, but let's do that in code. And there is very likely going to be more and more, and there already is somewhat of a way to do this just by adding a lot of different components from XR subsystems, but sometimes you need to do this in code, and you need to understand how they're doing it in code. So that's what I want to do now. So I'm going to go back to my custom scene here. And we'll leave the XR demo in, that's all fine. But what I'm going to do is just add a new component, which I call input manager. Let's make that a new script and add it. I think that's a good name for it, input manager. And we'll open that up in Visual Studio. So while that's opening, let me just explain what I'm gonna do here. So I plan on using several of the XR systems ways of getting input across all controller types to narrow down onto a specific controller and a specific button on a controller. Because of the way they've developed XR subsystems, and because they're not controller specific right away, it's more difficult to narrow down when you get to a single input than I initially had thought. You can actually ask for input by feature type, by the type of device it is, so controller, and also by the node that it is. So what we'll do is we will go through those various ways of narrowing down a call to Unity's XR subsystems management just to get input. Alright. So we have added that input manager. Now let's edit it. I will pause this while it spins up. And here we are. So we're using Visual Studio, and I do need to update Visual Studio. I'm like 2017 right now. Just get the community version of this. It should install with Unity. For some reason I have an older version right now, but I will change that soon. Anyway, the first thing we need to do is we need to import Unity engine and we'll also need, I think that's it actually. We just need well, let's go ahead and import the toolkit itself that we're using. So Unity engine.xr and interaction.toolkit. And so if you take a look at some of their scripts, they're all in a namespace called Interaction Toolkit, and this is just going to allow me to access their code with ease and take advantage of that. So before we get into start, we'll need a public game object, and this will just be our spawn object. And what I want to do is when we push a button on the left hand, so we'll do it to do detect left primary button and spawn from there you can see how to set up like a gun or whatever, right? Sort of. I have such violent video games in mind, but you get the idea. You can spawn AI objects if you want. You just have to set up a prefab with that you want to instantiate. So that's our overarching goal here. And let's go ahead and have a list. And this is going to be input device, which again I can access because I've used Unity Engine.xr and the XR Toolkit. And this input device just needs a name. Let's call it input devices. And let's have another list. And this list is going to be input feature usage. And we'll call this input features. And what we'll have to do is actually iterate through all the possible input devices that VR could be, because there are many different systems of VR. That's why XR is so cool. And then we'll go through all the features that they could have and look for a specific feature. In particular, we'll look for the left controller of an Oculus's primary button. The other thing we'll need is a public float, and let's call this wait duration, so a wait time between spawns. For now we can set it to 0.5f, otherwise we'll spawn a whole lot of objects really rapidly, which can look kind of cool. I might even just show you that first, and then I'll wait reset time. It can look pretty cool, but it isn't something you would normally do in a game, so we'll set that to 0 initially. Those are public, so we can set them in the editor. Let's have a public transform, for the spawn, let's just call it spawn transform. So this will be the spawn location that we spawn to. And we'll have a bool, a private bool, primary button left, so that'll be the button we're looking for. And let's just track its state. So we'll set it initially to false, and when that hits true, we can spawn things and then set our countdown for when we want the next spawn to happen. In start, we can make a call to input devices to just set up a new list of input devices, and input, and then we want to call input devices.get devices, input devices. Contain interesting. We'll have to see what's going on with that. Oh, this needs to be a capital I. So this is a call to the Unity's to a static method, input devices.get devices, and that is just going to go and grab all the input devices that are currently in this working in VR, and we'll do something similar for input features. For now, we can just set up a new list of input feature usage, like that, and that's it. And instead of update, since we're doing spawning, let's just go ahead and do fixed update. So that's going to give us a steady time frame between time.delta time. And then in fixed update, we can do two things. We can process inputs, which will be a method that we'll write, where we look for the inputs, and we'll set wait reset time to time.delta time. Now, let's do a private method called, you guessed it, process inputs. Alright, and here's where all the magic happens. So first thing we'll do is for each var device in input devices, and remember in start we got a call to all the input devices that are currently in the scene. So for each of those, we'll say if device try get feature usages, and we'll put in our input features. And then we'll iterate through those if we get some, and we should. So we'll do a for each var feature in input features. And we'll say if feature.type equals, so what I want to look for is, do we get a type of, is this a type of output where we can get a Boolean? So if feature.type equals, we actually don't need a parentheses there, type of bool, then we'll have a local bool here, which is our feature value. So this is going to detect whether buttons are pressed. And we'll do that with an output parameter. So if device, remember we're iterating through the device, so we might now be in a controller, and we'll try and get feature value. Feature dot as bool, and then for output we'll put the feature value. So that'll assign whatever the feature value is to output. Oops, we don't want a semicolon there. Alright, so if we get a device where the output is a Boolean, then let's check for something. Let's check if device dot role equals input device role dot, and now we can see all the various roles. So left-handed, and what we'll do is so now we've gotten to the left-handed controller. Bool left, what did we call this? Primary button left state. Bool. Alright. Let's actually make this here primary button left state equals false, and not up here, because I want this to be a local variable. What we'll do is we'll ask it if our wait reset time is less than our wait duration. So this is our timer here for spawning. Then we'll return. So basically we're in update, wait reset time keeps on increasing, and it starts at 0. And each time we go to process inputs, and it knows process inputs knows about this global value of wait reset time. So we're saying if wait reset time is still less than 0.5 of a second, half a second, we'll return. Otherwise, we'll allow the button to fire. So else, we're going to instantiate, if device role equals input role left-handed. We still haven't checked for the button though. So before we check for the reset time, we'll set things to false, do with if primary button right or left state equals true, or we could just do if primary button left state, make it a little simpler, and we'll set up the brackets here. If primary button left state's true, we'll do the if else, where we look for the time. And let me just comment this out for now. We need a little more work to do. So we have this bool feature value, yes. And we need to now check what the feature value is of the primary button of this device. So we know that we're in a device that is left-handed. And okay, so once we're in left-handed, we can do a device.try and get feature value. And we want to call common usages. And now you can see these are all the types of values that we can ask for. And what we want is primary button. And we'll use another output variable, primary button left state, which we just set up right here to assign that output. So what this is going to do is make this true only when the primary button is pressed, but not just any primary button, because we're only checking for that if we've detected that the input device we're using is left-handed. If we wanted to check for all primary buttons, we would just do this outside of this check. So that's what I mean by narrowing down on a particular input. It's a little harder to do because of the neutral way that they're approaching hardware, where they have a primary button regardless of controller type or even virtual reality type. We need to really narrow down on the particular hardware that we're interested in, and that's what we're doing here. So now all that remains is to instantiate. So we're just going to make a game object here. Instantiate our spawn object, and this is going to be spawn object transform position. We'll set that to wherever we want it to appear, like that. So remember, we have two public variables up here, one for the thing that we're going to spawn and one for the place that we want to spawn at. So I'm actually going to put that on one of the hands, or right in front of one of the controllers. And then the last thing we need to do is set the wait reset time back to 0, so the countdown starts over, and return. Alright, and that's it. So let's save that and switch back to Unity. And we need to make two adjustments here. So one is in our input manager, we need a spawn object. So I'm just going to go to their prefabs, and why don't we put one of these purple cubes in. So that'll be the thing that we spawn. Then we need a spawn transform. So let's look in our XRig camera offset left base controller and take a look at that. And what we can do here is just make another empty game object. And so this will be our transform, and let's just move it forward on the Z position by 1, so that it appears just a little in front of the controller. Let's save that. And then we need to actually hook that into the code that we just wrote. So there's our transform, and wait reset time looks good. Alright, let's test it out. No errors, so far so good. So I've got my controllers on my
left hand is the one with the, so now if I hit A on the left hand, you can see right in front, right there, we spawn these objects, and they are in fact interactable. So that's how you get like a particular usage out of a particular button. Okay, all right, I know that was a lot, but I think that's enough to get you started with even, very complex interactions here, and I really hope that was helpful to you. The new XR system is a little tricky to use, but it is incredibly flexible and powerful when used well. So once again, I'm Daniel Hampikian, working currently for the GIM department at Boise State University, and I hope you'll check us out if you're interested in game development, web development, app development, anything like that, especially with XR, VR. Consider the program. There's no substitute to just being in this awesome, learning environment with other minds and other perspectives, and just a boundless creativity like my students have. And if not, just get in touch with me, or subscribe to the video and share it so as many people as possible can make cool, creative, awesome VR, XR games. Thanks for watching.